we all know what this is. It's a piece of chalk actually that I got from the Chilterns, and I thought if you could take a look. Actually, I'll pass it round so you can have a feel. Caitlin, if you wouldn't mind passing round. So. Now, I've got a little quiz for you. If you could take a guess at how much water that holds. Now, as you know, chalks are very porous, and this is one of the amazing properties that means we can use it for water supply, but also causes groundwater flooding. If you'd like to have a go at the quiz there, and we'll see what we got. The three choices, if you can't get on there, are 285 mil, 775 mil, or 1375 mil. I'll give it a couple of minutes.
Do we win the piece of chalk?
Do you win the piece of chalk? Actually, no, I really need it back because the geologist who's lent it me was very specific that he wants it back. All right, results are coming in. No one's going for the smallest amount. So we got 20% of you saying 775 mil and 67% saying 1375. The right answer is 1375. So they can holds about 35% of its volume as water. You can pass it back to me if you like, although if you want to feel it, it's fine. So a little bit about me. I've been working in flooding for about 20 years now, and for the last few years I've specialised in groundwater flooding. I've played significant roles in the floods of 2001, 2007, 2014, and since 2020 it seems we have a flood every year. And I've managed every type of project you can think connected to flooding, and the project that I'm running now, called Project Groundwater, is it is the most exciting and innovative project I've ever worked on. And I think it can really bring national change. And we're going to explain to you how and why in the talk today. But next we're going to hear from Andrew of Kimpton, who's someone who has been affected by groundwater flooding.
The groundwater flooding in 2001 came as a huge surprise. I think it's had an effect on me because it's made me aware of what might happen. I think whenever one is faced with something that could seriously affect your property, it would have affected the way that we run our life, then it's bound to stay in the mind. When I tried to warn people who I felt were within the danger zone, they didn't believe me. What it would be sensible to do is to have a good plan of action. I think a groundwater alert system would be really, really useful because it would give you reassurance. It shouldn't be left to laymen like me to say help. And so to be part of a nationwide monitoring system, I think, is a very sensible course of action.
So I'm leading Project Groundwater, and groundwater flooding is the least invested in, it's the least well understood, it's the least forecast, least recorded, and least well responded to out of all the sources of flooding. And it can be the most devastating due to the long durations. Now, Project Groundwater has got several technical work streams which are going to address these, including monitoring, modelling, alerts, resilience and placemaking. Now, and we also have some cross-cutting themes of engagement, communications, evaluation, learning, innovation and mental health. Now, good luck trying to find out if you're at risk of groundwater flooding. Unless you can afford to pay for some pretty outdated basic maps based on some fairly old models, there's no national groundwater flood risk maps available, and there's no real reliable set of data out there. How are we supposed to really respond to and understand the groundwater flood risk if we haven't got the data to start with? But it doesn't have to be like this. We've already produced better modelling techniques on this project, and we're going to produce the highest quality groundwater flood risk maps ever made, without doubt, and we're going to make them freely available. And further than that, we're going to be calling for this to be done at a national level. Now, if you were a planner thinking about new development, the risk of groundwater flooding would seem like an important consideration. And yet there's a huge lack of data, guidance and policy, both locally and nationally. And yet the desire to do something different and better about this is there. Every local authority we've spoken to said they would love to have better policy and guidance and good data for groundwater flooding. Well, what we'll be doing is we'll be working to produce better guidance, and we will look to help local councils in our project area to try this out, and we'll then hope to roll this out more widely across the country. But further than that, we'd like to get national policy changed. We want to see policy improved so that groundwater flood risk is equally considered alongside all other sources of flood risk. To demonstrate this, if anyone, I know some of you know what this is, but if you don't know what it is, try and guess. Get it the right way around. Oh, there we go. If you can't see, it's beeping in water. So it's a dipper. Basically, it's used for, you go to a borehole, it's how you measure where the water table is, roll that out. Ancient technology, we think developed in England, and not only that, we probably have what's thought to be the longest monitored borehole in the world, which with a continuous record going back to 1836. Now, these days, I'm being labelled Mr. Groundwater, so I thought it only fitting that I make the effort and go and visit this borehole. And I did. And the reality is we still hand dip boreholes, including this one, once a month. Someone actually goes out with one of those, dips it, writes it down, adds it to a system. But I mean, this is the future. So one fine summer's day, I was having a pint with a friend of mine called Sven, and I happened to mention groundwater to him, and next thing I know, I'm in a secret military base in Oxfordshire looking at cutting-edge military drones, like this one. And what we're going to do is we're going to repurpose these drones. They've got ground-penetrating radar which can measure the water table, and it will give us a level of data we've just never had before. Here's a topic for us. So the Environment Agency has strategic overview for groundwater flooding, and local authorities like myself have responsibility. But do either of us have a clear way of helping those people like Andrew, who we heard from earlier, affected by groundwater flooding? No. Do either of us have funding in place to help us manage this groundwater flooding? No. It kind of falls through the cracks. It's barely recorded, it's not invested in, and the money that is available in the system is not really fairly reflected in how we allocate that funding. And we want to change all this. We want to bring clarity to the roles, and we want funding to be made to address the problem. And this needs to be based on a clear definition of the scale of the risk, its impacts, how you can measure them, and the benefits that the interventions can bring. And this is what Project Groundwater will be proving over its next 3 years. So, another area for you. Could we use nature-based solutions to help with groundwater flooding? Unknown. Can we retrofit sustainable drainage systems to help with groundwater flooding? Again, unknown. Sometimes it kind of feels like nothing can be done about groundwater flooding. But we all know they love these creatures. The beavers are back. It's probably the ultimate form of natural flood management. We'll be working on trials and innovations and building a robust evidence base with ground case studies, academic review and expert delivery. I think this is the future of flood risk management, and we're just getting started out on the journey for groundwater flood risk. I'll just let him finish his cabbage. Okay, some statistics for you now. If you were flooded in the 2 years that follow that event, you'd have a 25% chance of developing PTSD. You'd be 5 times more likely to suffer from anxiety, and you'd be 7 times more likely to suffer from depression. Now, is this not a greater impact on people than the damage to their homes? And is this not something that we should be entirely putting all our effort into when we work in flood risk management? We want to contribute in this area, and I feel there's so much more that can be done. We need more research and better understanding. So, jointly with Lincolnshire, who are here today, we've currently got a call out for proposals on this, and we're looking to fund the next nationally leading piece of research in this area. I believe this could be the impact, we could have the greatest impact out of everything we do on the project with this bit of work. Now you hear people say, oh kids, they grow so fast. Well, with Project Groundwater, we are too. Project Groundwater and the Chiltern Hills and Berkshire Downs, has already grown into a network of 3 groundwater projects, with Lincolnshire and Northumbria being the other 2. And now we're driving the creation of what we hope will be the leading international organisation for groundwater flooding. And that's just in 2 years. Let's Talk Groundwater Flooding will bring together learning, discussion and drive policy change. People want to talk about groundwater flooding. It's an exciting and important conversation, so please come and join us and let's talk. So, do you agree? I hope you do agree with me, but groundwater flood risk should have equal importance alongside all other sources of flooding. And you can help us do this and help communities affected by flooding if you sign up to our network with the QR code up there, use our outputs when they become available, and really just add your voice to ours. Groundwater flooding devastates communities, but the good news is the beavers are back. Go on, be like the beavers and help us. You don't even have to eat cabbage. You just need to join your voice to ours. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions from the floor, or if you prefer to submit them online, I can pick them up on here. The question was, why don't people think about groundwater in the same way as other types of flooding? It's a good question. I think there's a few reasons. It doesn't affect the whole country and to the same scale. So it's the smallest type of flooding, if you like. It's in pockets. It doesn't affect like whole cities. You don't get half of Oxford flooded by groundwater flooding. You just get little pockets of it, street here, street there. And then when it is happening, it doesn't make the news. It's slow. It comes up slowly. It's predictable, and then it stays there. There's no drama. You can't go back to Oxford again. You can't go down to the Thames and see it barreling through there under a bridge. It's just not like that. So it never gets in the news. And it's just not in public consciousness, I think. And then the other problem is back to how the system's set up. So it's because it's small and niche, it doesn't have that specialism, and so it gets, if you speak to any local authority, do they really understand that groundwater flood risk? They don't really. It's difficult because you don't have the data, you don't have the maps, you don't have the modelling. So yeah, hopefully we'll change some of that, but I think it's a long-term thing as well. We'll do what we can in the time we have left, but that's why the organisation Let's Talk that we're going to set up will hopefully carry that forward and keep the change going. The first point was around economic appraisal of schemes. So within the way we assess schemes, there is an allocation for mental health impacts. Now, that's based on the multicoloured manual, which the figure, if you look at it, as an average, you get about £5,000 per property flooded. It does have variations for depth, etc. We take as an average. Now, out of that, less than £50 can be for mental health impacts. The last research that was done in this area found that the cost to society of the mental health impacts compared to the cost to damage to physical property outweighed physical property by 5 times. So essentially, the system is completely upside down. We should be funding things that help reduce the mental health impacts with 80-90% of the budget. What we're doing is protecting property with 99% of the budget. We don't really do anything about mental health. You could argue that taking people, reducing their flood risk so they don't flood, obviously has the same effect, but as we all know, we have to live with flooding. You can't remove all the flood risk, The second point was around the mechanism of groundwater flooding and how it isn't considered equally, and that your point was that it comes up slowly, usually in basements, and months after the rainfall. So it's, because you're waiting for the recharge to filter through and so on. And yeah, it's a very valid point, and certainly something that we all see. So it's that consciousness again, isn't it? It's not linked to the storm and the surge, Yeah, the question was whether I'm thinking of collaborating with the BGS, the British Geological Survey. They're an active partner on the project, so they're helping us develop the new flood warning system that we're working on. So at the moment they sit in the Flood Forecasting Centre, National Flood Forecasting Centre, and do these kind of wide flood alerts for groundwater, but we're developing it with them and Jacobs to do it to a property level, which is what you have for all the other, for fluvial, you get property level, but you don't get it for groundwater, and that's what we're going to build over the next 3 years. And Yeah, in fact, we're going to do a podcast, myself and BGS. We've got it coming up in the next couple of months talking about it. So the follow-up was about SUDS and how the interaction of SUDS, sustainable drainage systems, and groundwater is a growing area. We do have an element of the project, again, that's looking at that. It's just started. We've got JVA going to be leading on that for us. And we're also working jointly with Thames Water on one of their projects called the Smarter Water Catchments, which we're hoping to install quite a large number of water bots. Again, I think it's the lack of data around it and the lack of studies that prove what's a good thing to do. You know, you're kind of using your general experience and knowledge to say, yeah, so it should help, but there isn't that evidence base to show it. So we're hoping to do some case studies and trials over the next few years and hopefully build to that evidence base, along with the work from the other projects like the one that Caitlin was talking about before. There's a kind of growth of evidence in the SUDS areas there. Yeah, a question around the timescales, how much time we've got to get more data and increase the evidence base compared to doing things on the ground. So I think it's kind of two-pronged. So Project Groundwater is a research and innovation project, and we're into 6 years and we're in year 3 at the moment. So we've got another 3 years to build that. But then the organisation that we're going to set up will ideally carry that on into the longer term and do the more difficult things that we can't do. Like, I'd like to see national legislation changed, I'd like to see national planning policy changed. These aren't things you can do easily. I think the Environment Agency should have a bigger role, for example. You know, they should have a national flood warning service, we should have national flood risk maps, or ideally combined flood risk maps for all hydrology. And I feel I'm pushing an open door with most of these things, but they're a bit difficult to change, as you're talking about. It's like moving a juggernaut, isn't it? But yeah, making a difference on the ground. Obviously, we've got 6 local authorities that are working in, and we'll be doing things on the ground in that period, and then hopefully bringing other local authorities in to take our learning and apply it themselves. So, you know, for example, roll out the flood warning system more widely than just the 6 counties we're starting with at the moment. So yeah, it's a challenge, but I feel like this is the first time, certainly I've known, ever be this level of investment and interest in groundwater flooding. It's always been, it's too difficult, it's not a priority, we'll put that on the back burner. It's always been there for local authorities and for the Environment Agency, and for maybe not so much for water companies, because their sewage network suffers quite badly in places, particularly in our project area. But yeah, so challenging, but I think we'll get there slowly. Could I give a brief synopsis of how the modelling works? I'm not a modeller, so there's 2 types we're doing. So one's looking at chalk and one's looking at permeable superficial deposits, so river gravels. And the chalk's been easier, but essentially they're trying to get to a point where the outputs will be similar to the flood risk zones with depths and durations, which currently none of the groundwater flood risk maps at the moment have that. If you wanted more detail, I can put you directly in touch with our modellers at Jacobs, but it's not my forte, let's say. There's a question about water quality in groundwater, which is a really interesting area. It's not one we've thought about much. Again, water quality is another area that falls between institutions, doesn't get funded properly. It's very similar to groundwater flooding in a lot of ways. So the comment was that the improved modelling and understanding of the water table and recharge might also help us better understand water quality impacts on the water table. Possibly, I don't know. It'd be nice if it did, but okay. One more. So the question was the project's based on research and innovation, and what direction of innovation are we looking to get at the end? I think it's a good question. It's one that we challenge ourselves with a lot. So, are we innovating enough? Are we really pushing boundaries? Are we actually doing something new here? And I think we are on every element. So maybe let's take one that I haven't particularly talked about, which was property flood resilience. So kind of flood doors, flood barriers, these things, they don't really work for groundwater flooding. You have to put in a sump pump, you have to waterproof your property, hugely expensive. Now, could we do something better here? Surely there must be some better ideas. Use technology from another area. So we're funding research and development in that, hopefully to give a better offering, basically, somehow. And the same with everything, really. We're trying to think. It's not hard because usually nothing's ever been done about groundwater flooding. It's like you look at climate change, for example. Is that going to make groundwater flooding worse or better? You'd think worse because more rainfall, more intense storms. But does that equate to a higher level of recharge? And then you've got to think about, but in the future, are we going to be taking more out of the aquifer through drinking water or less? Are we going to use more water? It's a really complicated picture. And again, the research disagrees the little that's done. So again, we're trying to get some work done in that area. It's everything you look at groundwater flooding, you'll find there's either a tiny little bit been done, like one person's done one bit of research, or there's just nothing. So it's quite easy to innovate in that sense, All right, I think there wasn't any online one, so I check that. Nope. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Thanks very much.